Hi folks, this is a response to Tobias's badass knives. Now, most of my knives on my channel are sub 3-inch slip joints, so you can hardly call them badass. The Victorinox Pioneer, for example, it might blind you with a bit of reflection off its blade, but it's probably the most damage it's going to do. It might overcut your fingernails with its scissors. But honestly, that's generally as badass as I get. But I had a wee think, what have I got that might fit the badass theme? And well, I've got this, which is fairly badassy, really. This is the Andre de Villiers Butcher. It's a 3.75 inch butcher blade. I mean, I really like this knife. I don't know if it's really badass, but I think it's kind of supposed to be. I mean, it's called a butcher. I love the shape of this blade. I like all the different shapes to it, and the polishes and the finishes and things. It's just an absolutely stunning piece of cutlery. I really like that. So I suppose that's badass a bit. And if we're talking about Tobias, who started this thing, I sent him my 1907 British bayonet, and in return for that, he sent me a box of stuff actually. But one of the things that was in that box of stuff was US Air Force survival knife. Now, I mean, it's a survival knife. It's not really Bad-Assery. Although, since he last saw it, I've polished up the handle, and I've scuffed up and seriously sharpened the blade. So it is actually sharp cutter, which of course, these things, when they arrive, they're not sharp. And I gave that blade a good rub down, because when it comes with its original parkerizing on it, it looks very flat and two-dimensional, and you can't really see the sort of the fuller and the saw teeth and the lines from the clip point. So just to emphasize all of those, I just gave it a good rub down with some very fine grit sandpaper, wet and dry paper. And as I say, I sharpened up the blade on a Lansky. Took forever. I mean, it's only 1095 carbon steel, but I wanted to put a sort of shallower profile on it and make it a wicked cutter. So it's perhaps badass in as much as it's sort of sharp, but it's only a 5-inch blade. But then I had a wee look around, and I had to think about some of the things that I've owned for years that I don't really carry or use or whatever. And I remembered I had this, which is a Tanto. Let's move that. Swap them around. This, I mean, it's what's called a Tanto these days, because it has this Tanto point. Although anybody who knows anything about Japanese knives will know that Tanto generally doesn't have a point like that at all. That's more akin to the boshi of a katana, but even then it's far more angular than you would ever see on a real Japanese sword. And one day I might show you some of my Japanese swords and explain that. I did show a Tanto to illustrate that point a little while back, but anyway, I suppose that's a bit badass. But then I thought back to my childhood. One of the very first knives I ever got, when I was 10, I got this one, is this Bowie knife. Now, I mean, it's sort of badass in that it's a bit big. I mean, compared to my Swiss Army knife, it's quite a chunk of a thing. Even compared to the ADV, it's quite big. But I got this, I say, when I was 10 years old. I always thought it was John Knoll, but it turns out it's actually by Thompson's, J.H. Thompson of Sheffield, England. Now it's been through the wars. I mean, not literally, but it has been red rusty at times, as you can see by all the pitting. And I brought it back to life. It's got a stack leather handle, peened pommel. The pommel is quite loose. It's been loose as long as I've had it, which is about nearly 44 years actually. It's reasonably sharp. It was never sharp when I had it as a child, but then there's a guy called Paul Scott when I was in the Scouts. He was an apprentice carpenter, and he wanted to use a knife to make a totem pole, so he borrowed this one and he sharpened it for me, and it came back sharp. It's the first time I've ever seen a truly sharp blade in my life. I kept it like that for a long time, but about 15 years ago my son purloined it, took it away, and it came back to me completely rusty and completely blunt, so I've had to kind of refurbish it. The other refurbishment I did was it came with a really rubbish sheath, and all the stitching had come out. Now, as a 10-year-old, I had no idea what to do about that, but I'd seen these studs that people put in leather jackets, so I put all these studs around it to reinforce it, and they have been in there now for 40 years or so. I mean, I suppose it shows because they look a bit manky. I don't keep the knife in the scabbard just on its own. I actually oil it and wrap it in cling film and put it in that inside the scabbard just to keep it good. But anyway, that's the closest I've got to Bad-Assery. I don't do that sort of thing. So there we have it. I was going to put that in the sheath, but there's no point. So there we have it. The closest I have to Bad-Assery. Thank you very much. Bye. Or we should have said, if you like this stuff, please tick the box, and if you want to see more of it, please subscribe. Thank you. Bye.